The restaurant was buzzing with the usual afternoon crowd, filled with the low hum of conversations and the occasional clinking of plates and glasses. The sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting a warm glow on the polished wooden floors and the neatly arranged tables. She moved among the tables with practiced ease, balancing a tray of drinks in one hand and a notepad in the other. Each customer was greeted with a smile, even if it was forced, and each order was taken with careful attention. It was just another busy day in her life, yet something in the air suggested that today might not be like any other. At one of the tables near the corner, a man in an expensive suit sat alone, scrolling through his phone. His watch caught the sunlight, glinting in a way that made it clear he was someone used to having power and wealth. He didn't look up when she approached, but there was an edge to the way he sat, an air of impatience that made her instinctively cautious. She took his order, keeping her voice calm and polite, hoping that her professionalism would be enough to make him comfortable. But as she jotted down his request, he looked up for the first time, his eyes sharp and assessing. There was a smirk on his face, subtle but noticeable, like he was amused by something only he understood. "A simple order for a simple person," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. It was one of those remarks that could be shrugged off if it came from a stranger on the street, but coming from someone sitting in an upscale restaurant, it carried a weight that made her stomach tighten. She paused for a moment, then nodded and said, "Of course, sir. I'll get that right away." Her voice stayed steady, though inside she felt a mix of irritation and curiosity. Who was this man who thought it was funny to belittle someone he had just met? As she walked away to place the order, she couldn't help but glance toward the corner where he sat. He was now looking around the room, observing everything with the air of someone who owned not just the place but the people in it. It was impossible not to notice him. He had that kind of presence that made other people take a step back without even realizing it. Yet despite his arrogance, there was something almost comical about the way he carried himself, like a child playing dress-up in a world he didn't fully understand. She returned with his drink, placing it carefully on the table. He raised his glass slightly, not in a toast, but as if acknowledging her effort. "Thank you," she said softly, trying to keep the tone neutral. He didn't respond immediately, instead letting his eyes drift to the small piano in the corner of the restaurant. It wasn't a grand piano, just a modest upright that seemed to blend into the background, often overlooked by most of the customers. But she knew it well. It had been there for years, and she had spent countless hours practicing on it when the restaurant was quiet. He leaned back in his chair, a sly grin forming. "I hear you play," he said, nodding toward the piano. "Is that true?" The question caught her off guard. She hadn't come to work expecting anyone to comment on her music, much less a stranger who seemed intent on testing her. "Yes," she replied cautiously, not sure where this conversation was going. "I enjoy playing." He chuckled, a sound that was more mocking than amused. "Enjoying is one thing, but can you impress? Can you make someone feel something with that little instrument? Or is it just a hobby for someone who serves drinks for a living?" His words were sharp, deliberate, meant to provoke a reaction. She felt her cheeks warm, but she held her ground. She had faced judgment before, whether for being young, for her job, or for people assuming her dreams were too big for reality. This was no different. Other diners had begun to notice the tension, glancing in their direction with subtle curiosity. There was a moment of silence, almost as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. She looked at him, a mix of determination and anxiety swirling inside her. She had practiced this many times in her mind, imagining how she would respond if someone doubted her, if someone tried to belittle her for doing what she loved. And now the moment had come, whether she liked it or not. "Would you play for me?" he asked, leaning forward slightly, the smirk still present but with a hint of challenge. It wasn't a request. It was a command disguised as curiosity. Her heart raced, but she didn't retreat. She nodded slowly, gesturing toward the piano. "Of course," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves that churned in her stomach. She walked toward the instrument, each step measured, aware of every eye in the room watching her. She sat on the bench, her fingers hovering above the keys for a brief moment. The restaurant seemed to fade away, the conversations dimming into the background, leaving only the piano and the expectant eyes of the man who had dared to doubt her. She took a deep breath, letting it steady her, letting it remind her that this was her moment, not his. She had practiced in quiet corners. She had played when no one was listening, and now she had a chance to show that her music was more than just a hobby. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, like a whisper. She played carefully, letting the melody build slowly, feeling the music flow through her fingers. The sound was simple at first, but it carried a depth that was unexpected for such a modest piano. She closed her eyes briefly, letting herself become immersed in the rhythm, letting the emotions guide her hands rather than the fear of judgment. As the music continued, she felt a change in the room. The tension that had been so heavy began to lift, replaced by a quiet awe. People leaned forward slightly, listening more intently, drawn into the melody. Even the man who had challenged her seemed momentarily caught off guard. His eyes narrowed, not in mockery now, but in focus, as if he were trying to understand how someone could make such beautiful sound come from such a simple instrument. Her fingers moved with increasing confidence, the notes flowing smoothly, creating a story without words. It was a story of struggle and patience, of quiet determination, of moments when one had to stand strong even in the face of ridicule. She felt the emotions pour out through the keys, each note carrying a piece of herself, her dedication, her dreams, her resilience. The music grew richer, filling the corners of the restaurant, touching each person in a way that words could not. She played not to prove him wrong, but to express herself, to let the music speak for her when words were not enough. There was a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere, a collective realization that what they were witnessing was genuine talent, untainted by pretense or showiness. The man's smirk was gone now, replaced by a look of disbelief. He had expected mediocrity, something ordinary, something that would confirm his assumptions about people in service jobs. But what he heard was extraordinary. It was precise, emotional, and powerful, yet it carried a humility that made it even more impressive. He leaned back in his chair, silent, unable to interrupt the flow, unable to mask the surprise that was flickering across his face. She finished the piece, the final notes lingering in the air like a soft echo. The room remained quiet for a brief moment, almost in shock, before the applause started. It was tentative at first, then grew louder as people expressed their appreciation for what they had just experienced. She stood, giving a small nod of acknowledgement, feeling a mix of relief and satisfaction. She had faced the challenge, she had played from the heart, and she had left an impression that went far beyond any initial ridicule. The man looked at her, still silent, his previous arrogance replaced by a mixture of astonishment and respect. He hadn't expected this, and it showed. His eyes softened slightly, and there was a subtle nod, almost like an unspoken apology or acknowledgement of her talent. She returned to her work, her steps lighter, her confidence quietly restored, knowing that she had risen above the doubt and shown her true abilities. The restaurant buzzed again, but now with a renewed sense of energy, a sense that something remarkable had just occurred within its walls. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly, though her mind was far from the usual tasks of taking orders and refilling drinks. Every time she looked toward the corner where the piano sat, her thoughts drifted back to the man who had challenged her, the millionaire who had expected nothing and was now left speechless. She couldn't help but wonder what he thought of her performance, whether he realized how much courage it had taken for her to play under such scrutiny. She carried on with her work, serving plates of food and drinks to other customers, smiling and nodding as they thanked her. But inside, a mix of emotions swirled: pride, relief, and a touch of nervous anticipation for what might come next. The piano sat quietly in the corner, a silent witness to her talent and her determination. She had always loved the way music could transform a space, could change the mood of a room, and today had proven that even to strangers who had doubted her. Meanwhile, the millionaire remained at his table, his mind clearly occupied. He wasn't the kind of person who usually sat quietly, but something about the performance had caught him off guard. He had been used to impressing others, to being the one in control, the one people looked up to. But in that brief moment, all of that had seemed irrelevant. Here was someone who had talent, who had confidence, and who had shared it without needing approval or recognition. It was a reminder that skill and dedication could not be bought or forced. Other diners began to whisper among themselves, their curiosity sparked not only by the music but also by the unusual dynamic between the waitress and the man who had challenged her. Some commented on the beauty of the performance, while others speculated about what might have provoked such a display. The waitress moved among the tables with grace, responding to questions and smiles, but her mind occasionally drifted back to the encounter, replaying the expressions she had seen on his face and the subtle shift in the atmosphere. Later, as the lunch crowd thinned and the restaurant quieted, she found a few moments to approach the piano again. Her fingers brushed lightly over the keys, not to perform, but to feel the instrument, to remind herself of the power she held through her music. The millionaire was still at his table, now idly scrolling through his phone, but she sensed that he was no longer mocking. There was a different energy in the air, one that carried a mixture of curiosity, respect, and perhaps a hint of apology for his earlier arrogance. He finally spoke, breaking the silence. "You didn't just play. You told a story with those notes," he said, his voice quieter than before, lacking the sharpness it had held earlier. The words surprised her. He wasn't known for compliments, at least not sincere ones, and hearing him speak in this way made her pause. She nodded politely, a small smile forming on her lips. "Thank you," she replied. It was simple, but it carried the weight of her experience, her hours of practice, and the courage it had taken to play in front of someone who had doubted her. The millionaire leaned back, studying her for a moment longer. He had expected a performance that was adequate at best, something to pass the time and amuse himself. Instead, he had witnessed talent and dedication, a reminder that not all achievements could be measured by money or status. He had underestimated the quiet strength and resilience that came from passion and persistence. For the first time that day, he felt a subtle unease, a recognition that he had misjudged someone based solely on appearances and assumptions. She returned to her duties, moving through the restaurant with calm efficiency. Each time she passed the piano, she felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing that her music had left an impression. The experience had been more than just a performance. It had been a statement of self-worth, a reminder that talent and dedication were valuable no matter who recognized them. The interaction with the millionaire, though uncomfortable at first, had allowed her to assert her abilities in a way words could not. As the afternoon turned into early evening, the restaurant began to fill again with a new wave of customers. She greeted each one with her usual warmth, but now there was an added confidence in her demeanor. The encounter with the millionaire had reminded her that respect and recognition were not always given freely, but they could be earned through skill, persistence, and the courage to showcase what one could do. She moved from table to table, her interactions smooth and professional, but her mind often returned to the piano, to the music that had allowed her to connect with people on a deeper level. The millionaire, on the other hand, remained seated, occasionally glancing at the piano as he sipped his drink. He was not the same man who had walked in with a smirk and a sense of superiority. There was a quiet contemplation in his gaze, a realization that he had underestimated someone he assumed was ordinary. It was a humbling experience, one that reminded him that wealth and status were not the ultimate measure of a person's abilities or worth. She caught glimpses of him as she moved through the restaurant, noticing that he no longer carried the same arrogance. Instead, there was a restrained curiosity, a willingness to observe rather than judge. She continued her work, feeling the subtle shift in energy, knowing that her talent had left an impression that would linger longer than the meal or the brief interaction. In the quieter moments between customers, she found herself thinking about her journey with music. The hours spent practicing in solitude, the dedication to improving her skills, and the moments of doubt she had faced along the way had all led to this point. She realized that these experiences, though often private, held a power that could emerge at unexpected times, transforming perceptions and commanding respect without the need for words or explanation. The evening continued, and the restaurant gradually emptied once more. She found a moment to sit by the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys. The memory of the performance, the reaction of the millionaire, and the subtle applause from other diners filled her with a quiet pride. She had faced a challenge, had played from the heart, and had left an impression that went beyond the ordinary expectations of the day. As she prepared to leave for the evening, she glanced at the man one last time. He was packing up, preparing to leave, but there was a noticeable difference in his demeanor. He no longer carried the smirk of superiority. Instead, there was a respectful acknowledgement, a silent recognition that talent and dedication could not be overlooked. She nodded briefly, a small gesture of understanding, and he returned it with a subtle inclination of his head. Walking out of the restaurant, she felt a renewed sense of confidence and purpose. The day had started like any other, with routine tasks and the familiar rhythm of work, but it had transformed into an experience that affirmed her abilities and her worth. She had faced doubt and mockery, yet she had responded not with words, but with skill and passion, allowing her music to communicate what could not be expressed otherwise. The encounter would stay with her for a long time, a reminder of the unexpected ways in which life tested people and revealed their strengths. It was not just a story of a performance. It was a lesson in courage, in perseverance, and in the quiet power of talent and dedication. As she walked home, the evening air cool and refreshing, she felt a sense of calm satisfaction. She had played, she had expressed herself, and she had left an impression that would not be easily forgotten, proving that true talent and determination could shine even in the face of doubt and arrogance. The following day, the restaurant was quieter than usual, but she moved through the space with the same steady rhythm, taking orders and refilling drinks. Her thoughts, however, often wandered back to the previous afternoon. She replayed the performance in her mind, remembering each note, each expression on the faces of the diners, and especially the reaction of the man who had doubted her. The memory brought a quiet smile to her lips. She realized that the experience had changed her in subtle ways. She felt lighter, more confident, and more certain that her talent had a place in the world. As the day progressed, the restaurant filled with the lunch crowd once more. She approached each table with a calm professionalism, but there was a noticeable difference in her movements. She no longer moved just to complete her tasks. She moved with a sense of pride, knowing that the work she did and the passion she held could resonate far beyond the immediate room. Customers noticed the difference as well. A few commented on her cheerful demeanor, some offered polite smiles, and others seemed drawn to the quiet confidence she now exuded. Then, just as the lunch rush was beginning to taper off, the door opened, and the man entered once more. The millionaire who had ridiculed her and demanded a performance yesterday now walked in with a different air about him. He scanned the room before settling at a table, and she couldn't help but notice that the smirk that had been there the previous day was now replaced with a more neutral expression. Something had changed, and she wondered if he would challenge her again or simply observe. She approached his table, offering the usual polite greeting. "Good afternoon," she said, her tone calm and confident. He nodded in acknowledgement, and she took his order with the same care and attention she gave every customer. There was a subtle tension in the air, a mix of anticipation and curiosity, as if both of them were aware of the unspoken connection that had formed through music the day before. After serving his meal, she returned to the nearby tables, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching her, evaluating her again. She tried to focus on her work, moving with efficiency and grace, but the awareness of his gaze lingered. There was a challenge in the air, unspoken yet palpable, a test of her composure and skill that seemed to extend beyond the piano and into every interaction. Eventually, he spoke, breaking the quiet murmur of the restaurant. "Would you play again?" His tone was softer, less mocking than before, but there was still a note of curiosity. She paused for a moment, considering her response. Playing yesterday had been nerve-wracking, but it had also been empowering. Today, she realized, was another opportunity to share her music, to express herself, and perhaps to allow him to understand the depth of her dedication. She nodded slowly. "Yes, I can play," she replied, her voice steady. She walked to the piano, each step deliberate, feeling a mixture of anticipation and calm determination. Sitting on the bench, she allowed her fingers to hover above the keys, feeling the familiar texture and weight that had become extensions of herself over years of practice. The room seemed to hold its breath once more, the energy of the diners fading into a quiet backdrop as she prepared to play. This time, she began with a soft, flowing melody, letting the music build gradually. She allowed herself to be immersed in the emotion of the piece, letting her feelings guide her fingers. Unlike the previous day, when nerves had threatened to dominate her performance, she felt a deeper connection with the piano, a sense of freedom and control that allowed the music to take on a life of its own. Each note was deliberate, each phrase carrying a story of determination, resilience, and quiet triumph. The diners were drawn in immediately, the melody captivating their attention without forcing it. Conversations ceased, and even the clinking of dishes and glasses seemed to fade, replaced by the soft, powerful resonance of the piano. The music told a story without words, a narrative of personal struggle and achievement that everyone in the room could understand on an emotional level. She played not just for the millionaire, but for herself, for the countless hours she had spent perfecting her craft, and for the idea that talent and dedication could leave a mark even on strangers. The man at the table listened intently, his previous arrogance replaced by genuine curiosity and admiration. He had come expecting perhaps a repetition of yesterday's display, but this time, he was confronted with something deeper, more refined, and more personal. He leaned forward slightly, the subtle shift in his posture revealing that he was fully engaged, not just observing, but trying to understand the story behind the music. Each phrase seemed to challenge his assumptions, dismantling the preconceived notions he had about people in service roles, about appearances, and about what it meant to be truly skilled. As she continued to play, the melody grew richer, more intricate, demonstrating not only technical skill but also emotional depth. The restaurant, filled with ordinary lunchtime chatter moments before, had become a space of shared experience, a place where emotions flowed freely through the music and connected everyone present. She felt a sense of liberation, a quiet joy that her talent could move people in such a direct and meaningful way. The performance lasted longer than expected, and when she finally reached the final notes, the silence that followed was profound. For a brief moment, no one moved, as if the music had suspended time itself. Then, slowly, applause began to build, hesitant at first, then stronger, as diners expressed their appreciation for what they had just experienced. The room was alive with recognition, not just for the technical skill displayed, but for the courage and heart that had gone into the performance. She rose from the piano bench, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming, not because she had sought approval, but because she had shared a piece of herself in a way that resonated deeply with others. The millionaire's expression was harder to read, but there was no mistaking the respect that now tinged his gaze. He had witnessed something extraordinary, something that transcended social status and personal ego. He spoke softly, almost in a whisper. "You play with more than skill. You play with your soul." His words were different this time. They were genuine, carrying the weight of someone who had been humbled by the talent and passion he had previously underestimated. She nodded, offering a small, gracious smile. "Thank you," she replied. She didn't need to say more. The music had already communicated what words could not. The rest of the afternoon passed with a lighter atmosphere. She continued to serve customers, but there was a renewed energy in the restaurant, a sense that something exceptional had occurred. People talked quietly about the music, about the waitress who had captivated the room, and about the transformation of an interaction that had started with doubt and challenge. The piano remained in the corner, silent now, but still a powerful symbol of her ability to rise above skepticism and judgment. She found herself reflecting on the lessons of the day. Talent alone was not always enough to gain recognition. Courage, timing, and the willingness to take a risk were equally important. She realized that each opportunity, no matter how daunting, was a chance to demonstrate not just ability, but character. She felt a deeper appreciation for the journey she had undertaken, the discipline of practice, and the quiet persistence that had brought her to this point. As the evening approached and the restaurant began to close, she took a few moments to sit at the piano once more, running her fingers lightly over the keys. The notes were soft, exploratory, a quiet conversation with herself and the instrument she had come to love. She thought about the millionaire, about the doubts and arrogance that had first greeted her, and about the transformation that had occurred not just in his perception, but in her own understanding of her power through music. Walking out into the cool evening air, she felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond any applause or acknowledgement. She had faced challenge and ridicule, and she had responded with talent, passion, and authenticity. The experience had strengthened her confidence and reinforced her belief in the value of her abilities. It was a reminder that true expression, grounded in dedication and courage, could leave an impact that transcended status, wealth, or initial impressions. The day had been more than a performance. It had been a declaration of her strength, skill, and unwavering commitment to her art. The following morning, she arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual, the quiet streets and soft sunlight giving her a moment to gather her thoughts before the day began. She had replayed the events of the previous days countless times in her mind, thinking about the way the music had moved people, the way she had faced the challenge, and the way the millionaire's attitude had begun to change. Each memory brought a mix of pride and calm determination. She knew that whatever the day held, she was ready to meet it with confidence and grace. As she opened the doors to the restaurant, the familiar smells of freshly prepared food and brewed coffee greeted her. She moved through her morning routine, checking the tables, setting up the dining area, and making sure everything was in place for the lunch crowd. Yet, beneath the surface of routine, there was a quiet anticipation. She sensed that the previous encounters with the millionaire had shifted something, not just in him but in herself. She felt more in tune with her abilities, more aware of the impact her talent could have when shared openly. The restaurant soon began to fill, the hum of conversation and laughter creating the usual background rhythm of work. She moved among the tables, taking orders and responding to requests with her customary politeness, but now her presence carried an additional layer of self-assurance. Customers noticed the subtle difference in her demeanor, and a few commented on her cheerful energy, not realizing that her inner confidence had been strengthened by recent events. Each interaction was an opportunity to demonstrate not only her professionalism but also the quiet pride she felt in her own accomplishments. As lunch approached its peak, the familiar sound of the restaurant door opening drew her attention. She glanced up to see the millionaire entering once again. This time he carried himself differently. There was no hint of arrogance or smirk on his face. Instead, he walked with a composed demeanor, a quiet attentiveness that suggested he was ready to observe and learn rather than judge. She greeted him with a polite nod, feeling a sense of calm resolve. His eyes met hers briefly, and she could see that he remembered the performances, that he remembered the music and the courage it had taken to share it. She approached his table, taking his order with steady hands and a measured voice. He responded with a quiet acknowledgement. No teasing, no mockery. The change in his behavior was subtle but undeniable. The room seemed to notice the difference as well. Other diners cast curious glances, sensing that something significant had occurred between the two of them, though they could not yet define it. There was an unspoken understanding that the interactions were evolving, moving toward a moment of realization that went beyond ordinary service or casual observation. After serving his meal, she returned to nearby tables, her movements deliberate and composed. Yet, her mind remained partly focused on the piano in the corner and the man who had challenged her talent. She felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that her music had the power not just to entertain, but to communicate, to challenge assumptions, and to inspire recognition of skills that were often overlooked. It was this understanding that made her approach the piano again with calm resolve. When the millionaire spoke, his voice was quieter than before, carrying an unspoken curiosity. "Would you play for me once more?" he asked. This time there was no challenge, no mockery, only genuine interest. She nodded, feeling a surge of calm determination. "Yes," she replied. She walked to the piano, her steps measured, her mind focused on the music and the story she wanted to tell. Sitting on the bench, she allowed her fingers to hover above the keys, feeling the familiar weight and texture that had become extensions of herself over countless hours of practice. The first notes were gentle, flowing like a soft breeze through the room. She played with a careful patience, letting the melody develop gradually. Unlike the earlier performances, this time she allowed herself to be fully immersed in the emotion of the piece, letting her feelings guide her fingers without hesitation. The music spoke of persistence, of quiet strength, of the triumph that comes from dedication and courage. Each note carried meaning, and each phrase was a reflection of her journey, her resilience, and her belief in the power of skill and expression. The diners, once caught up in their own conversations, now listened intently, drawn into the narrative of the music. The atmosphere shifted, quieting as the melody filled the space with an unspoken message. She played not for approval or recognition, but to express herself fully, to communicate through the universal language of music. Every note was deliberate, carrying the weight of countless hours of practice, and every pause was intentional, allowing the emotion to resonate in the room. The millionaire watched closely, his expression shifting as the music unfolded. Gone was the smirk, replaced by a mixture of astonishment and admiration. He had expected a display of technical skill, perhaps, but what he witnessed was far more profound. A connection between talent, emotion, and authenticity that could not be manufactured or bought. He leaned forward slightly, eyes focused on her hands as they moved across the keys, trying to absorb the depth of her performance and understand the story behind it. As the piece progressed, the melody became richer, more intricate, demonstrating not only technical mastery but also emotional intelligence. The restaurant was transformed, the ordinary lunchtime setting becoming a stage for the power of genuine talent. She felt a sense of liberation, a quiet joy in sharing her music and witnessing its effect on those around her. The diners were captivated, their attention fully engaged, their reactions sincere and unprompted. When she reached the final notes, the room remained silent for a brief moment, as if time itself had paused. The impact of the performance was palpable, and then, gradually, the applause began to build. It started softly, with hesitant claps from nearby tables, then grew louder as more diners joined in, expressing their appreciation not just for the music, but for the courage and heart that had gone into it. She stood, offering a small nod of acknowledgement, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment and fulfillment. The millionaire, for his part, remained seated, processing what he had just witnessed. His previous assumptions had been dismantled, his perception of her transformed by the performance. He spoke softly, almost to himself. "You play with skill and with heart. It's impossible not to feel it." His words carried a weight of respect and a quiet humility that had been absent before. She nodded, understanding that no further words were necessary. The music had conveyed what speech could not, leaving an impression far more enduring than any casual conversation. The rest of the afternoon passed with a lighter energy in the restaurant. Customers moved through their meals with smiles and quiet conversations, but there was a lingering awareness of the extraordinary display they had witnessed. The waitress continued her duties with calm confidence, each interaction carrying a subtle grace and assurance. The piano remained in the corner, silent but powerful, a symbol of her talent and the quiet strength she had demonstrated. In quiet moments between tables, she reflected on the lessons of the day. Courage, skill, and authenticity were more important than wealth, status, or external approval. She understood that true recognition came from dedication, perseverance, and the willingness to share one's abilities fully, even when faced with doubt or skepticism. Each opportunity to perform, each interaction, was a chance to assert her talent and character, and she felt a renewed commitment to embrace these moments with confidence. As the evening approached and the restaurant prepared to close, she took one final moment at the piano. Her fingers traced the keys gently, playing a soft, reflective melody, savoring the quiet intimacy of the music. She thought about the millionaire, about the way his perception had changed, and about the subtle shift in energy between them. The experience had been transformative not just for him, but for her own understanding of her abilities and the impact of sharing her talent authentically. Walking out into the evening air, she felt a sense of fulfillment and quiet pride. She had faced challenge, ridicule, and skepticism, and had responded with skill, heart, and courage. The performance had left a lasting impression on those who witnessed it, and more importantly, had reinforced her own belief in the power of dedication, authenticity, and the human ability to communicate through art. It was a moment of personal triumph, a reminder that true talent, when expressed with passion and integrity, could transcend status and expectation, leaving an enduring mark on the world around her. The following morning, the restaurant felt different, though nothing had changed physically. The familiar smells, the polished floors, and neatly arranged tables were all the same, but there was a quiet energy that lingered in the air. She moved through the space with ease, taking orders and serving drinks, but now with a deeper sense of purpose. The events of the past few days had left a lasting impression on her. She knew her music had reached beyond the keys, leaving an impact on people she hadn't even expected to touch. The lunch crowd began to arrive, the familiar rhythm of conversations, laughter, and clinking dishes filling the room. She greeted each customer warmly, her movements calm and confident, her smile genuine. There was an unspoken understanding in the air that this was a place where talent could shine quietly amidst ordinary routines. Each order she took and each plate she served carried a sense of accomplishment, an inner pride that came not from recognition alone, but from knowing she had faced challenges and risen above them. Once again, the door opened, and the millionaire entered. This time, he did not carry the air of challenge or skepticism. His posture was relaxed, his gaze curious but respectful. He was aware that the previous performances had left him changed, that the arrogance he had carried with him had no place in the presence of genuine talent. She noticed his entry, and there was no tension this time, only a quiet acknowledgement between them. He had seen what she could do, and he understood now that respect was earned through skill and dedication, not assumed through wealth or status. She approached his table, taking his order with her usual professionalism. There was a calm exchange of polite words, nothing forced, nothing patronizing. The subtle difference in his demeanor was noticeable. He listened attentively as she confirmed his request, offering a simple nod of appreciation. It was clear that he had reflected on the experience of the past days and had learned the value of humility and recognition of talent beyond superficial appearances. As she moved among the other tables, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The piano in the corner, though silent at the moment, seemed to call to her, a reminder of the power she held through her music. She thought about the performances she had given, the way the melodies had filled the room, and the reactions she had received. Each moment had reinforced her understanding of courage, of the importance of persistence, and of the quiet strength that came from expressing oneself fully and honestly. When the millionaire finally spoke, his voice carried a tone of genuine curiosity. "Would you play again?" he asked, not as a challenge, but as an invitation to share. She nodded, feeling the familiar rush of anticipation mixed with calm determination. "Yes," she replied. She moved to the piano with purpose, each step deliberate, feeling the texture and weight of the keys beneath her fingers. Sitting down, she let herself become fully present, aware of the room, the diners, and the story she wanted to tell through music. The first notes flowed gently, carrying a softness that contrasted with the earlier intensity of performance. She allowed the melody to develop naturally, letting each note convey emotion without forcing it. The music was expressive and nuanced, telling a story of resilience, courage, and quiet triumph. It was not a performance meant to impress, but a true reflection of her skill and heart, a declaration of her journey and dedication. The diners, captivated once more, fell silent, allowing the music to reach them fully. She played with increasing confidence, each note deliberate, each phrase resonant. The room became a space where emotions could be shared without words, where understanding and appreciation flowed naturally. She felt a deep sense of connection, not only with the listeners but with herself, recognizing the power of expressing one's talents authentically. The millionaire watched closely, his expression one of reflection and admiration. He had expected another display of skill, but what he experienced was a profound demonstration of artistry and dedication. His assumptions about talent, status, and ability were further dismantled as he listened to the performance. Each note challenged the preconceived notions he had held, reminding him that true ability could not be measured by wealth or position, but by passion, commitment, and heart. As the performance continued, the music grew richer and more intricate. She moved seamlessly, between softer, reflective passages and more dynamic, powerful sequences, demonstrating both technical mastery and emotional depth. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted, the ordinary lunchtime scene transformed into a space of shared emotion and appreciation. The diners were drawn in, responding with quiet admiration and attentive focus, recognizing the dedication and courage required to play with such authenticity. When she reached the final notes, the room held its breath for a moment, as if savoring the last echoes of the music. Then, slowly, applause began to build, growing in volume and sincerity as diners expressed their appreciation. She rose from the piano bench, offering a small, humble nod to acknowledge the recognition. The sense of fulfillment she felt was profound, not derived from attention, but from knowing that she had shared her talent fully and honestly. The millionaire spoke quietly, his words carrying sincerity and respect. "You have a rare gift," he said. "It's impossible not to feel it when you play." She nodded, accepting the compliment with grace. There was no need for further explanation. The music had conveyed what words alone could not. The experience had solidified the understanding that genuine talent, expressed with dedication and courage, could leave a lasting impact on those who witnessed it. The afternoon continued with a sense of calm and renewed energy. Customers enjoyed their meals and conversations, the atmosphere lighter and more vibrant than before. She continued her work with composed efficiency, each interaction infused with subtle confidence. The piano remained a quiet symbol of her achievements, a testament to the perseverance and skill that had carried her through challenges and moments of doubt. In quieter moments, she reflected on the journey that had led to this point. The ridicule and doubt she had faced had been difficult, but they had provided an opportunity to demonstrate strength, resilience, and talent. She understood that recognition was earned not through words or appearances, but through dedication and the courage to share one's abilities openly. Each performance, each act of expression, was a chance to leave an impact that transcended superficial judgments. As the restaurant prepared to close for the day, she took a moment to sit at the piano once more. Her fingers moved gently over the keys, playing a soft, reflective melody. The music was a conversation with herself, a reminder of the growth she had experienced and the lessons she had learned. She thought about the millionaire, about the change she had witnessed in him, and about the power of authenticity and dedication to transform perceptions. Leaving the restaurant, she stepped into the evening air, feeling a sense of quiet triumph. She had faced doubt, ridicule, and challenge, and had responded with skill, heart, and courage. The experience had left a lasting impression on those who had witnessed it, and more importantly, had strengthened her own understanding of her abilities and the value of authentic expression. Her journey with music had proven that talent, when shared with dedication and integrity, could inspire respect, admiration, and a lasting impact, transcending assumptions, status, and expectation. Walking home, she reflected on the transformation she had undergone. Each day, each challenge, and each performance had reinforced her belief in the power of courage, perseverance, and the human ability to connect through art. The encounter with the millionaire had been a catalyst, revealing not only the impact of her music on others, but also the strength and resilience she carried within herself. She felt a sense of fulfillment and readiness for whatever future opportunities might arise, knowing that her talent, heart, and dedication could shine regardless of circumstance.